Hey everyone, welcome to Pastor Play. So today we're reviewing Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities series, episode 8, final episode of the series, titled The Murmuring, and it's directed by Jennifer Kent. All right, so we open up with you have these ornithologists, aka they're just basically studying bird experts, and couple Nancy and Edgar, they go to a home on a secluded island to birdwatch. Um, they receive donations from like rich families. They seem to be doing some kind of study that is used at Cornell College. That people can donate money to and funds to for them to basically do more research. It kind of seems. And now Nancy and Edgar, they have some marital problems. The communication isn't really communicated. They have lost their daughter Ava just a year ago, and they have just been disconnected from each other since. Edgar does seem to be trying, to talk to Nancy and try to kind of, I guess, rebuild their relationship, and kind of talk about the death itself. And Nancy just seems more closed off. She hasn't cried at all. She just seems kind of more just more non-feeling. And they're both still trying to deal with it in their own ways, but they're just not connected to each other. And then, of course, one night at this house, the house is on a secluded island itself, but anyway, at this old house, Nancy sees someone running. She's just like little figure running, and the attic door starts banging, and she goes up to find a group of Dunlin birds migrating kind of in the attic through a hole in the attic wall. And she doesn't tell her husband about the running figure, because they're supposed to be the only two there. She runs and gets him and wakes him up to record the Dunling birds, their bird sounds, and record them just kind of migrating up there in the attic roof. And then we have another night in the house at night when they're sleeping again. Then you get a shadow of a boy. He shows up in the room and says, "I'm cold. I'm cold." And then I'd be like, it's time for me to go. And I would just leave the fire on and say goodbye, Edgar, Nancy, let's go. No, she stays. And at one point, she tells Edgar that it's creepy. The house is creepy, and he's like, it's just an old house. It has creaks, it has rumblings. He kind of just disregards what she's saying to an extent, but she is the only one that's seeing all of these things. And Nancy kind of discovers that the previous owner of the house was pregnant by a married man who promised to leave his wife once he came back from the war. But once he came back, shocker, he stayed with his wife. And so this woman's family moves her and her son into this house on this secluded island. And then the woman, even though this is years later, the woman, in assumingly her grief or depression, she drowns her son in a tub, and maybe he's like 4 or 5 years old from the way the boy looks, maybe. And then she takes her own life after that. And then there's one point in this episode where Nancy's like, I don't believe in ghosts. And it's like, well, Nancy, they believe in you because you're the only one that they seem to be communicating with. She's hearing babies cry. She's seeing this little boy who's drowned and died, saying, my mommy's mad at me. I don't know why mommy's mad at me. I'm cold. She starts seeing the ghost, the actual mother ghost, saying, why did you do that? Or what did you do? And so, it's like, yeah, you don't believe in them, but clearly they believe in you, Nancy. And, you know, basically, I mean, I guess the correlation that they're trying to make is, Nancy's grief and loss of her daughter Ava, that she really hasn't, I guess, kind of dealt with externally. She's more maybe internalized it by not really showing any emotions or showing that she has any kind of feelings towards it. As far as Edgar is concerned, the house is connecting to it, because just because she hasn't shown that she hasn't cried, or that she's not crying, or that she seems unaffected, doesn't mean that she's not. And with the grief of the mother who, drowns her son in this house kind of has this, tragic, yeah, spirit about it. And I guess the point that maybe this episode is trying to make, or, Guillermo or the director, is that, the house is connecting to the grief and the loss of the mother, drowning her son, and the son, feeling, that his mom is mad at him, and his spirit is connecting to Nancy's grief and loss of her daughter Ava. And that's why she's seeing these things, and, she's going through the motions. Now, at one point in this episode, she ends up helping, the child basically move on. He's like, it's dark, I'm cold, my mom is mad at me, and she's like, come into the light, run towards me. He runs to her, and I think his spirit kind of goes up into heaven, like, he kind of gets he resolves he resolves his, issue with his mother, and he kind of, his spirit gets freed. Now the mother, once she helps the kid, the mother just seems to kill herself again, and then kind of like fall down. I don't know, is that her like final ending resolution? But it seems like it is. And then after this happens, um, Nancy basically, lets Edgar know that she's ready to talk about Edgar. I'm sorry. Nancy lets Edgar know. Nancy lets Edgar know that she's ready to talk about Ava now, because probably after helping the child move on and seeing what happens to the mother, she's like, I'm assuming she's thinking she doesn't want to, have this kind of miserable life. Hopefully, they basically end it there, where, she tells Edgar that, she's ready to talk about Ava, and the episode ends. Now there's a really cool scene with like the son, when he turns, well, one of the times you see the son, he turns around and his face is like all like, all like grayish and black, probably from drowning in the tub. So I guess she kind of sees what he probably looked like at the time when they found the body or something. So that was kind of, I guess, scary. And there's this kind of cool scene where the mother's like, what have I done? What have I done? Or what have you done? Which I'm assuming she's talking to herself. Like, what have you done? Because she was the one that drowned her child. But she like floats she kind of like flies across the room all angrily, actually twice, two different times. So those things are kind of cool. The last actually 10 minutes has some pretty cool, I guess you can call it maybe CGI special effects. There's one cool thing with birds kind of swarming around Nancy that's really cool too. I mean, what's this? I would say this is more like suspenseful kind of mystery. I wouldn't say that this episode was scary either. I would say, like, out of all the episodes, maybe this one, there was episode number 6 with the witch. That wasn't necessarily scary either, but that had a decent story. But none of them to me have really been scary. Some have been more like intellectually kind of sci-fi thriller type stories. I guess depending on what you consider scary to yourself, like the one with all the, was it the second episode or the first one with all the rats? If you have a fear of rats, that probably may scare you. If that, like, if you thinking about it, like, makes your skin crawl or something, I don't know. But I like this one. I like the one with the witch. The first 2 episodes were more about people making bad decisions, doing wrong, and kind of having to pay for their um, of treating of people. Some of these are like moral stories too. I don't know if I would really consider any of these to be like horror stories. There were some things that were like horrific. You did have the one with the painter. That one kind of had the creatures that were like disturbing to look at, and that was more dark horror. Yeah, actually, the one with the painter, that was kind of that was a little, I guess, horror, more horror sense, cutting off the head of the child and cooking it in the oven. But I mean, overall, the series isn't bad. If they do another like season of this or another set of episodes, let's say next year, I would probably check it out just to see what they do differently. Episode 7, I don't even know what the heck was going on in that episode. The collector collects this kind of random artifact that ends up consuming him and turning him into a monster. That one was kind of like psychedelic, and there was a lot of cocaine and weed. That episode was so like random. I was like, okay, this is what we're doing. I didn't even really know how to explain that one. I didn't even do that one. So, but you know what? 6 out of 8 isn't bad either way. But I mean, overall, the series was okay. I didn't think it was really that scary. I think some shows have more moral kind of lessons. Some were more thriller, sci-fi than horror. But there were a couple episodes. This is more like just like a haunted house, more or less. And it did have some suspense to it to an extent. I wouldn't, maybe one or two jump scares, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. And the one with maybe the witch could be more be scary depending on how you look at it. And the one with the painter probably had the most horror blood element to it, I would say. So the one with the painter probably is the more probably the one that was the more horrific or whatever, with the blood and all that, and the eyes being gouged out or whatever. So either way, overall, I enjoyed it. If they do another season of this, or next year they do another series or whatever they want to call it, limited series, I wouldn't mind it. And if you like this review, hit the like button. If you have any comments about this or any of the other episodes, did you like any of the 8 episodes of this series? Comment below, and please subscribe if you haven't done so. Trying to get 1,000 by the end of the year, and I will see you next time, next review.